Seems like some sort of subliminal switch.
The playoffs are very different than the regular season.
The most uncomfortable thing ever.
If it could go right, it did go right.
If it wasn't for Lamar Hunt, Philip Anschutz, and Robert Kraft, this league would not be here.
Hey folks, what's going on? My name is Scott Schertzen with Streampunk Soccer. Joining me, as is often the case, is Mr. Bill Akins, who covers the USL champion Pittsburgh Riverhounds. And joining us today, radio play-by-play man for the Sporting Kansas City team, Blake Aerni, is going to be talking a little bit about the new sporting director there, what the future is going to look like, and basically life, the universe, and everything. So, sir, how the heck are you?
Yeah, doing great. So glad to be here. It's going to be fun.
Appreciate it. So, super quick question before I turn it over to him as well. Right now, congratulations on the job at this point. You are, I can say this outright, amazingly young. I'm kind of jealous by that one a little bit there. But yeah, congratulations on the gig. You've had it for a couple of years now. Talk about the experience so far.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. It's been great. Honestly, the people at Sporting Kansas City are so good at getting me, involved and trying to get me in on some of the things that I might be wanting to do, trying to get, help me grow my career. Because to be completely honest with you, I didn't really know exactly what this world was like when I kind of fell into it. Obviously, most people that are getting into broadcasting with a club have been doing this for a long time. And I was someone that hadn't done it for all that long. I had done the broadcasting part of things for quite a while. In high school and into college, I had grinded and wanted to do something like this, but I guess the professional world I didn't necessarily know all that much about. So it's been great to learn the business through a lot of the awesome people at Sporting Kansas City. Nate Bukaty, who was the play-by-play broadcaster for SKC for I think 7 or 8 years. He's now on Apple TV. He's the one that got me in the door. He's the one that helped me out. He's the one that helped me get to this point and is the reason that I'm here. And Ali Trost Martin, who's now working with CBS Sports. She was the play-by-play broadcaster for Sporting for a year. Those two are just such great, role models and people that I can look up to that have been giving me such good advice and really helped me along this way. So Sporting is just full of some really good people, and I've been the beneficiary of that.
Nice. Proud of you, man. I love it. Bill, you got anything, man, or you want to keep rolling?
Yeah, go ahead. Keep rolling.
Copy that. All right. So,
Awesome.
Like I said, in this case here, the team, let's not sugarcoat it. The team has struggled the last few seasons. One playoff appearance, I think, since 2021. In this case, they've had a struggle on defense. Goal differential's been rough the last few seasons. But in walks David Lee of the MLS champion, New York City Football Club here. You've got some changes going on that side of it. Talk a little bit about that changeover, what the fans can maybe expect going into 2026, 27, 28.
Yeah, from what it seems like is it's going to be a work in progress. As of right now, it's still a work in progress. That the team is not at the level that they want it to be, and I think that they didn't try and sugarcoat it, like you said, when they came in. They knew that the roster wasn't built in the way that they needed it to be. They knew that when they came in, they were going to have to release some contracts, allow some guys to walk. That maybe the fans really enjoyed watching play. The fans loved the personalities of those players. But at the end of the day, they're running a business. They're trying to win games. And they didn't feel like those guys were guys that they could see going forward and being long-term pieces. Because first off, of course, they want to win right now. But the biggest emphasis for this team and for David Lee and for Raphaël, Wicky, it feels like, from my perspective, their goal is to bring in, one, the right guys, and two, guys that they can see 3, 4, 5 years down the line, either still contributing or that they can get a profit off of, guys that they could sell in a couple of years so that then they can bring in new players. It's a long-term build. This is not something that they're going to go out, because they could just go sign 8, 9 guys right, in this window that are guys that could fill the roster and could impact the team right now, but they don't want to get stuck in contracts that a couple years down the line they feel like they really didn't, they aren't happy with. So it feels like this is a slow build. It's a slow, rebuild's just such a hard word to use because you don't want to use that word. But I feel like what everyone around is using is this is a new era of Sporting KC. We've seen an era in the early 2010s that was the best era of Sporting Kansas City. Under Peter Vermes, he led this team to so much success. I mean, if you're looking at, you can see the stuff behind me. You've got some scarves. You've got, this was the first game at the stadium. You've got all these great moments that I grew up getting to watch in Kansas City. And it's what made me a huge soccer fan, was that when Sporting Kansas City was as successful as they were. And I think that that's what this new staff wants to bring forward, is something that the success, they of course want it this year and next year. But the thought is a couple of years down the line, they're building something that can just continue to push for the playoffs, continue to push for trophies, because ultimately short-term success means nothing if it doesn't happen in the long term.
Sure.
Okay, so my question, Blake, is David Lee comes in, obviously, Vermes, longest tenured coach in MLS history, 2009 to 25, brings in Raphaël Wicky, obviously, he was let go after an 0-4-2 start in 2025. I guess my question is, how's this been perceived, or how's this been received by the fan base? Is it a much needed change, or what are they, what has their reaction been to this?
Yeah, I would say to start last year with the departure of Peter Vermes, it was at least in the eyes of a lot of the fan base that I had heard from and I had talked to, it was a needed departure, but it was that bittersweet moment of, you gave us everything that we could have wanted in Major League Soccer. You won us MLS Cup. You won us 3 Open Cups. As a player, he was a legend as well. His name is on the wall at Sporting Park for a reason. He's won just about everything with Sporting KC. So there was that bittersweet moment of, we appreciate everything you've done, but at the same time, this isn't working anymore. And it wasn't. To be completely fair, things weren't working. And I think everyone was aware of that. So the second that happened, it was really tough, I think, the way that it happened, because they had just re-signed him following that 2023 season to a new contract. It was a great run in the playoffs in 2023 when they beat St. Louis. It was like this huge moment for Kansas City. And then shortly after, he gets a couple of games into the season and he gets let go, or I guess they mutually part ways. And now you've got to kind of sit here the rest of the season trying to figure out what the step going forward is, because you're going to have to bring in, David Lee eventually was brought in as the general manager or the president of soccer operations and general manager. That's his official title. Exactly. I'm like, I got to get that right. No, but he's brought in to do that. And then he's got to bring in a coach. And we've realized a ton of staff has had to have been hired, because what was set up previously wasn't necessarily set up for what this staff wants to do. They want more people in analytics. They want more people scouting and all of those things. So yeah, I think that overall the fan base as a whole has reacted to this as pretty understanding, realizing that this is going to take time. And I think a lot of people are happy about Raphaël Wicky coming in as Sporting's head coach. Of course, didn't have a ton of success in Chicago. You can say what you want about the squad that he was given there. Obviously, he wasn't necessarily set up for success. Here, it feels like, of course, the squad wasn't to the level that he wanted it to be when he came in, but they've started to add pieces, and it seems like there is a serious ambition to go and add more players in this window, or the remaining of this window, and the upcoming window in the summer. It feels like there's really some ambition, which I don't think he necessarily got in Chicago. But you look at some of the things that he did in Switzerland with young boys, he's clearly a talented manager. He's clearly a very good tactical mind, at least from the conversations that I have had, very brief conversations I've had with him, and some of the conversations I've had with people that work around him, is that he is a very tactically smart guy, and he's really good at communicating that to his guys. He's really a good leader of men, a leader of a team, because he emphasizes a lot. Recently, I asked him about it, was suffering together and being a team, being a unit. And I think that that's something that we're starting to see. Again, it's just, I think it's a slow build, and we're not going to see it every week. Sporting wins against the LA Galaxy was 2 weekends ago, and it feels like, okay, this might be the beginning of what we're going to see under Raphaël Wicky. And then Sporting loses 4-1 to Colorado, and it's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't get too high, shouldn't get too low, because we're still in the process of building. So overall, I think the fan base is trying not to be too reactive, but at the end of the day, they're fans for a reason. They're allowed to do that.
Well, in this case also, I mean, obviously you're building around Joveljic, clearly.
Yeah.
You know, you brought him in from, you just mentioned the Galaxy. You know, he's put up good numbers. And he's put up good numbers so far this season. So clearly he's going to be the anchor, not only for the offensive side, but to draw people in as well. Because you talked about the summer transfer window and everything like this. Because the offense is more or less, I think, in a good place. It's that defense and that back end that's struggling right now. That's the same way it's been for years right now. Do you know right now offhand what the plans are with that? What they're going to address in that area?
Yeah, so they brought in Diego Borges in this recent. I guess they've brought in 2 defenders now in this recent window. Or Blorian is an Israeli center back that will come in once. He'll come in after the next, or after the World Cup break, I should say. So he'll be here later in the summer. So there's 2 pieces that you got to think they are making strides in the right direction. But you're absolutely right. You know, this attack is good enough. You know, Dejan Joveljic is, for my money, up there with the best strikers in the league. There's a serious argument you could make that he's the best finisher in the league, the best goal scorer in Major League Soccer. And now, you know, Manu Garcia is a part of that midfield attack. He has been a great creator, finding guys in behind. They're trying to speed up the wing. Calvin Harris has started to come into his own a little bit. Kapita Kapemba is a player that Sporting just bring in, who looks very exciting coming from the Polish league. I think that this is, again, they're trying to put the players in this roster that fit the style that Raphaël Wicky wants to play. And I think that in that slow process, we're starting to see this attack come together in a way that, like you said, it's good enough. The back line is something that, of course, you have to look at and say, yeah, 4 goals against a Colorado team is just not good enough. You know, conceding 70 goals last year is nowhere near good enough. You know, this is a team that, like you said, has struggled defensively in recent years. But I think that overall, that's something that you just have to wait for the right players to come in. I think the guys that you have in the roster right now have shown moments where they can defend well as a unit. I think that overall, when we're watching a game where they concede 4 goals, it does come down to mistakes a lot of the time. And how much of those can you allow? How much of those can you kind of brush off? I think that's up to the people, you know, the powers that be that are making those decisions. But overall, I think that there is an improvement needed in the back line, like you said. But, you know, is that a tactical thing that just they need more games to try and figure out? I don't know. I would also say that I think I'm excited about some of the guys that they're bringing in terms of Borges and Blorian.
Nice.
So, excuse me. So 2026, Blake, saw kind of basically, I mean, I would call it a purge of the squad. I mean, 12 players released. Yeah. You know, you had some fan favorites like Johnny Russell, Eric Tomey, Kerry Shelton, all moving on to different clubs. Obviously you got Joveljic, who, you know, has emerged as a key performer. Has that, I guess, still focusing on the fan base, has that led to any rumblings from the fan base? Like I said, with some of these fan favorites that have been released?
Yeah, it was certainly tough. You know, when Johnny Russell walked, I think that was tough for a lot of the fan base, because he's one that there's a serious argument to say his name could be in the stadium someday. He was certainly a fan favorite. You know,
right.
The only thing that I think that was tough with him is that he was never able to walk home with a trophy. He never won a trophy with SKC, but he provided so many moments for Sporting KC fans. And when he walked, I believe that was, you know, I think it was the end of the 2024 season. He walked in 25, played for Real Salt Lake. That was a bittersweet moment when he played against Sporting KC for Salt Lake. He ended up scoring at Sporting Park, which was just one of those moments where the fans didn't know what to do. They didn't know whether to cheer or whether to say some not so nice things to him, which I think they ended up doing the latter, and he ended up clapping back a little bit. But it was all in good fun. I think Johnny Russell is such a fan favorite in Kansas City. And then obviously, like you said, Eric Tomey is a big one that a lot of fans were frustrated when they let him walk, because he, again, in 2025, in a team that didn't necessarily have all that many exciting games, exciting moments, he was one that provided a lot of big moments. I think back to 2024 when Sporting played Inter Miami at Arrowhead Stadium, where the Chiefs play. It was a packed crowd, and Eric Tomey was brilliant that game. Scored 2 goals. Sporting ended up losing 3-2, but it was Eric Tomey was going to do everything he could to keep SKC in that game. in the U.S. Open Cup final in 2024. He scored the equalizing goal that sent the game to extra time. I mean, he's had some great moments with SKC as well, and he's with the Galaxy now, so he's clearly still talented enough to play in this league. But I think that at the end of the day, that was a decision that David Lee made and just decided that this wasn't a player that he saw going forward in the future. And I think everyone around the club accepted that and realized that was the decision David Lee made. But it is probably frustrating, I think, for a lot of the fans who just love these players. They watch these guys week in and week out. And, me getting to work with some of them, Eric Tommy's one that just an incredible human being, someone that I wanted to be around. And so when he left, of course, it was a sad moment. But at the end of the day, I think I keep going back to it's a business, and he didn't see them in the future going forward. And while that is frustrating, you have to trust that decision and trust that it's best for the club.
Now, let me ask this. Bill, you had something?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when it comes to David Lee, now, one of the problems that happened when he was with NYCFC is there was oftentimes a lack of moves during the windows and the off season. And honestly, for lack of a better word, it pissed off a lot of NYCFC fans. Now, there is some theory that a lot of that might have been hamstrung by the suits over at CFG, in the European level. In your experience from what you've seen with him, do you feel like maybe he has more freedom with KC than he had with New York?
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell because it's been so, it's so early at this point. But I will say it does feel like there is freedom. They're giving David Lee the opportunity to build the team that he wants. And it doesn't feel like maybe there's the same handcuffs that there might be under a City Football Group. Under, you have to, I think there's just a lot more restrictions when you're under a larger corporation like City Football Group, where they have yeah, and they have requirements of you that they have a goal for you while you're trying to build the team you want. They also have an idea of what they want that to be. And I don't think that necessarily exists as much in Kansas City, because I think that the ownership group in Kansas City sees David Lee and they say, we hired you for a reason. You're the guy that is the expert in building a roster. David Lee came in and he said, I like building things. And I think that there's a reason that the ownership group saw that and said, we want to hire this guy. He's going to be able to build something. And I think that, again, I can't make that blanket statement that it is, because I don't necessarily know what it's like at City Football Group. I've never really been in behind the scenes there. But at the end of the day, I will say it feels like David Lee is being given the freedom to build this squad the way he wants.
Nice.
Well, and I will say one thing, being in the New York media market and going to Kansas City is like night and day. They're going to be and Scott, you can attest to this. Yes, they're going to be a lot harder on you in New York City than they necessarily are going to be in Kansas City. I mean, that's just a fact. You're under a microscope. Right. So I think from that standpoint, I think it kind of gives him a little bit of breathing room where he can kind of, he's not under a microscope 24/7 like he is in the New York media market. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because you talk about that. When you talk about the Kansas City market, the Kansas City Chiefs are under that kind of microscope right now. You look at Brett Veach, who's the David Lee of the Kansas City Chiefs, I guess you could say, or David Lee's maybe the Brett Veach of supporting KC, however you want to put that. But, he's always under the microscope. Whereas I think David Lee coming into an SKC team who's been struggling for some time now, people are going to be more patient with him naturally. Whereas when the Chiefs are going to win in Super Bowls, if they release, or I guess, some of these trades that they've had recently, like getting rid of a bunch of the players on defense, people have kept them under a microscope. And, 10 years ago, I don't think many people would have made comments about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that the Chiefs just added Walker too from Seattle was a big grab too. But anytime the Chiefs do anything, Patrick Mahomes goes to the Journal. He's got 17 people surrounding him. But in this case, being in Kansas City, he's able to swing a little bit more under the radar a little bit, which I think is also maybe adds to some of the freedom. Because even though here in the New York City area, I'm out of Jersey, but in the New York City area, there was still a lot of focus on what was going on here because they're pulling 25,000 a game. Granted, with Messi over the weekend was 45, but there was so much more stress on this side of it than it would be with some of the smaller markets like there or Colorado or San Jose or any of the teams out west. And I think it allows maybe someone like David Lee and the entire team to be like, we don't have to put as much pressure on ourselves. We want to win, obviously, but we're not under, like you said, that microscope, because anything the Kansas City Chiefs do, or even the Royals, I mean, in this case, the baseball season is now like a day away. It allows him a little more flexibility to kind of do what he needs to and not have to answer to the press all the time. Big win.
Yeah. Well, it is funny though, because he's been doing a lot of media in Kansas City, and I think he said something along the lines of like, I've never done this much media when I was in New York. People in New York City did not care as much about NYCFC in terms of asking him questions about in the media as Kansas City, because I think there is something to that of, NYC, it feels like people are probably more keeping him more under the microscope, but in Kansas City, because there's not as many teams, because there's not as much, it is a bit of a smaller market. We don't have a hockey team. We don't have a basketball team. It's football, baseball, and then soccer. You've got Sporting in the Current.
Yep.
And so I think that there is a different pressure probably, because people have those other teams to watch, but they do truly care about SKC, especially this era. It feels, or this generation of people who grew up watching Sporting KC win trophies. They have that expectation. And so they're not going to just let him off. If SKC are terrible for a couple seasons, they're not going to just forget about him and let him walk, or let him keep doing his thing. They're gonna be in Sporting KC's comment section. They're going to be at games talking about how they want something to change, something to get better. And I think that's a different kind of pressure that, I can't speak for him. I don't know if he likes that or not, but I feel like if I was in his position, I would probably like the fact that the fans do care about the team and they want me to succeed, but it doesn't feel like it's the same pressure of you're always being scrutinized for every decision you make.
Fair enough. Yeah. So, Bill?
I have a question. So, do you think they're going to, we know what's on the horizon with the, the league alignment with the seasons and everything like that. We talked about it on the show before. It's going to open up, a world of, it's going to line everything up with the world for transfers and whatnot. Do you think they're going to pursue any big European names, any young talent, any, do you think that's going to?
Is that one of the fan questions, by the way?
That is one of the fan questions.
We may as well just roll with the fan questions at this point. Sure. Perfect. Fine.
Yeah. I guess, people have said in the past, Sporting KC never really had a big name player. And, I guess people are really curious whether the new ownership is going to be open to that.
Yeah. Hey, they were in for Ronaldo, according to Taylor Twellman. Sporting was in for Ronaldo, so maybe they are ambitious. No, I do think that's a good question. It's something that you're starting to see more and more. It's funny because the word retirement league or that phrase was thrown around, I feel like, following David Beckham coming to Major League Soccer, and it's been funny because you start to see, I would say that was a fair assessment of the league at some point, probably pretty early on in this league. But now we're getting to a point where those European players are coming over. Timo Werner's not at the end of his career. Heung-min Son is not at the back end of his career. Like, of course, they're probably on the wrong side of their prime, maybe you could say, but it's not in terms of a retirement league. So this league is starting to be a league where stars in Europe are actually considering it as a serious choice in a step in their career. And so I think that Kansas City, while it does have the struggle of not being LA, not being Miami, I do think that it's now a club that, I guess it's probably been this for a while, but it is now a club that is interesting to those people, or to those players, to those European players. And it certainly feels like with this, with David Lee in the position he is, and with where the ownership group is right now, it feels like they would be willing to go out and grab a player if that seems like the right decision. But from what I've seen from David Lee and the players that he's trying to bring in, the profile of players, it doesn't feel like they're going to make a decision where they bring in a guy for PR or they bring in a player just because they're a big name, they're going to sell seats. It feels like if they're going to bring in a big European talent, it's going to be a player that's probably on the right side of their prime. And it's someone that they think that they see being a long-term contributor and a serious piece for this team for years, or a piece that they can bring in And if he wants to go to make a jump somewhere else, they're going to allow him to do that. So I don't think that this is a club that's going to bring in just a aging star, but I think it's definitely a club that's ambitious enough to bring in a European talent, to bring in, I mean, Lasse Berg-Jonsson, who Sporting just brought in from Malmo, is kind of one of those players. I would say he's on the right side of his prime, and he was playing for Malmo, and he won a trophy with Malmo, the Swedish Cup with Malmo, and was the captain. Like Malmo's a big club. They're a big club in Sweden, and he was playing for the Norwegian national team. It feels like, if there's fans saying Sporting aren't ambitious or they don't want to bring in European talent, it's like that right there is a European talent. He's the kind of player that, I don't know what his ambitions are, but he's a player that you could see playing in one of the top leagues in Europe in a couple of years, if that's what he wants, and if he continues to progress in the way that it seems like he is.
Nice.
And we've talked about it before. The MLS is in the top 10 in leagues in the world right now. And it is, and it's. We've talked about it before. I think the World Cup this year is going to even bolster that even more.
Sure.
So, but yeah. So
all right. Let's see. We some of these I admit we've already kind of covered, but they're fan questions, so I want to give the fans some love here. Sure. What's the long-term goal with the franchise in terms of identity now that there's a massive overhaul from what we've seen since the transition from the Wizards to Sporting KC? Very curious if there's insight into the club's vision for the last 5 years that felt, quote, stagnant, dismal, and redundant.
Sure. Yeah, I think that is a big one. Can you repeat that? I feel like I need to hear that one more time.
You mean the three words?
Or just yeah.
Stagnant, dismal, and redundant.
Oh no, the overall the question.
Oh, okay.
The beginnings of the question.
What is the long-term goal with the franchise in terms of identity? Now that there's a massive overhaul from what we've seen since the transition from the Wizard to Sporting KC.
Yeah, I think if we're talking identity on the field, this team wants to be exciting, and not that they obviously Peter Vermes and the Sporting KC of the 2010s wanted to be that. It almost feels, at least from what I've heard from the identity that this team wants to have on the field, it feels a little bit like the prime Sporting KC in the early 2010s, where they want to be quick on the wings, they want to control the ball, they want to be able to play up the sides of the pitch, work it into a great striker in Dejan Joveljic, who they've got right now. It feels like this team almost is going back to the roots of Sporting KC, but they aren't doing it like it's almost unknowingly. David Lee and Raphaël Wicky aren't super clued in with, okay, what made Sporting KC great in 20. I think they know now. I think they've been in the job long enough that they kind of know what made this team successful, but I don't think that they're doing it because they know that's what made Sporting KC successful years ago. I think that this is almost a modernized version of what we've seen in some of the successful Sporting KC teams of old or of previous seasons. And so I think that it's a tough question to say what do they want to make their identity, because I think that that's something that is still building, and I think we're starting to see the beginnings of it. But in terms of the identity of the club as a whole, I think that this club wants to kind of get back to being cool again. I think that there was a time where in the 2010s, the early 2010s, this club was, it probably benefited off the fact that the Chiefs weren't that great, that the Royals were struggling. The Current didn't exist yet. And so it's like, it was the hot button item. Sporting Kansas City was the place to be. They were winning trophies. It was cool. And I think that, winning fixes everything. So if this team gets back to being the level that I believe they're gonna be, it is a lot easier to be cool. But I think that overall that this club's trying to just get back to having the identity that they are fast, exciting, scoring goals and defending well. Because again, that's one thing that I think a 2012 team conceded less than 20 goals in the season or so. It was some ridiculous number. I need to go back and look. I always end up having conversations with some of those players who were on that team are still working in and around the club. And it's always fun to have conversations with those guys of just like how valuable it is to have a defense that can go into a game and you can genuinely expect that they're going to get a clean sheet.
Sure. And defense wins championships, as the saying goes regardless of the sport, really. So,
no, yeah, 100%.
So.
All right, so we talked about the big European names. What do you think about? Do you think do you think they're more focused on, bringing in experienced guys to kind of, hey, let's try and win this thing now, or do you think that they're kind of, hey, we need to we've kind of overhauled everything, we've had a big major shift in ownership. Obviously, Vermes is gone. Do you think maybe it's time to focus more on young talent, or what do you think?
That's a good question. I would say it feels right now like they're bringing in players that they see making a long-term impact. And so that might not mean that they're going to be pushing for an MLS Cup in 2025 or 2026 or, pushing for trophies right now. I do think that that's a goal. They want to win now. Everyone wants to win right now, and they don't want to sit and wait and say that, in a couple of years we'll have this, because ultimately I don't think that that's the goal either, is to say we're going to win in a couple of years. I think that the goal for this team right now is to bring in players that are a good long-term fit. If they can bring in a player that is making a serious impact right now and is a good long-term fit, I think that they'll do that. And I think that they've done that already with a couple of players. But I think that they don't want to be stuck. They don't want to be making decisions to try and fix something right now if it's not going to help them in the long term. And so I think what that ends up being is they're maybe putting off competing at this point in time so that they can be one of the better teams in the league next year and in 2028. And, or I guess it'd be with the new season set up, it'll be 27, 28, whatever, it'll be 27, 28, 28, 29, all that kind of stuff. So they'll want to compete in those seasons. I think that this is still a team that is very unknown. If they start to bring in more pieces and they start to show that this is a team that can really push for the playoffs, I think that that's something, obviously, they're going to try and compete now. They're going to try and win a trophy right now. But I don't think that winning an MLS Cup this year is top of mind right now. And obviously, I don't want to speak for them because maybe their goal is to win right now. But from the decisions that they're making, it feels like top of mind is let's build a team that can be a juggernaut 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years down the line.
Get to November.
And maybe sacrifice being the best team in the league this year.
Sure. Yeah, I think for this team right now, getting to a playoff spot would be a win for the season.
Yeah.
Even
absolutely.
If
I think that people ask, what's a realistic goal for SKC this year, and I think that is a realistic goal. Mm-hmm. It's with the roster they had coming into the season, it would be hard to say that this is a team you'd expect to make the playoffs because it just wasn't. It wasn't built up to the level they want it to be. But I think that if this is a team that can stay competitive until the World Cup break and then over the summer start to bring in a couple more players and make a push at the end of the year, I think that that's a great position for this club to be in, where they're building for the future. But if they can sneak into the playoffs this year, it would be a fantastic position to really build that hype and to really show that, okay, these guys aren't messing around. Even though they aren't necessarily hyper-focused on this season, they can still win now. And I think that would give a lot of confidence to the fan base and a lot of confidence to people around SKC.
Well, and I think... No, I was just going to add, I think that not having a winning season since 2021, you know how it is. Fans get impatient, They get impatient. They don't really look at the big picture, whereas ownership sees, hey, you know what? We need to go in a different direction. We need to focus on the future. And if that takes us a few more years, hey, it is what it is. The fans will thank us later when it's all said and done. They'll look back and say, okay, yes, you did it the right way. However, like I said, it's we know this. Every professional league, it's what have you done lately, right? Yep. And a lot of fans lose, they lose patience, And but I think they're doing it the right way. I mean, if you ask me,
You see what happened with San Jose last year versus now.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
And to be fair, that is the job of a fan. Yeah. The job of a fan is to let you know how they feel right now. And
sure.
And I think that that's obviously something that the ownership and David Lee have to deal with. But I think they're doing a pretty good job of that right now.
Yeah,
I think so.
Agreed.
I think we got time for one more, and after that we'll call it here. What are the changes in ownership? How did that? Sorry, let me try that again. Take two. How does the change in ownership affect the ability to make moves when it comes to deals falling through? Was it a lack of funds in the original owner? Supporting staff, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see any change there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Peter Maluk is someone who seems very ambitious, and I think that is exciting to see. I can't say that the previous ownership wasn't that. It feels like they were because when Sporting had a lot of their success in the early 2010s, it was because that they were building rosters, and Peter Vermes was able to build rosters that were very, very competitive, very, very talented. So I don't know that I necessarily had much of an inside, behind the scenes view of what was going on there. And I still really don't have that much of a behind the scenes view as to what's going on in the ownership group. They do keep it pretty tight, which is, I think, a good thing, to not know everything that's going on behind the scenes with the ownership group. But at the same time, from what I have heard about Peter Maluk, the new owner who has taken a major stake, I mean, the ownership isn't necessarily changing because the Illig family is still a part of the ownership group. They still are involved in the decision making, but Peter Maluk is just taking more of a overall majority stake in the club. So he's someone who's been very successful in business. He knows how to run a business. Creative planning is his business in Kansas City, and it is one of the biggest financial planning companies in the United States. Honestly, it's probably one of the biggest in the world at this point. He is clearly a successful guy who knows how to bring people together and build a business and build something. And I think that he hires great people in his job. And I think that in this job now, he's hiring really strong people like David Lee to come in and do their job well. And so he's going to give them what they need. I think he is very ambitious, and you don't come in and pay that kind of money for a club if you don't want to see them win. And I think that that's the thing, is he wants to see this club win. He wants to see Kansas City relevant in Major League Soccer. And I think that he's going to continue to do that.
Nice. Appreciate that. Bill, anything else?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm good. I mean, I think this club's on the right trajectory. I really do.
Yeah, so. I think so as well. It feels like all the conversations I've had with people, it's not where it wants to be right now at this point in time, but each decision being made is pushing towards a better future.
Nice. Last thing on this one right now. This is the important one. How can people find you on radio, social media, and all of those kind of things?
Yeah, so we're Sporting. It'll be on the Sporting KC app, is where you can catch most of the games. Sports Radio 810 WHB if you're in Kansas City. That's where we are for all the games, and of course Apple TV. You can switch over to the home radio broadcast now, so all the home games for SKC. Yeah, the hope is that the away games we can start pushing towards doing that, but it's good. And then on Twitter, it's at Blake Aerni, AERNI, and Instagram's Blake.Aerni. So, find me there. We've started a new podcast as well with SKC, so you can see some of those clips on Instagram and on YouTube as well. So it's a good time.
Nice. All right, Mr. Aerni, I appreciate the time. You've been awesome. I'm grateful for the time on this one. I really appreciate it. Good luck to the rest of the season. Like I said, I think there's some hope going forward, and the fans, I think, deserve it. Again, it's been a little bit of a struggle the last few seasons, but it's about moving to the right direction and landing 9th place, 10th place here. I think we paved the way into even the sprint season, with what's happening next season. Because if you see the sprint season, it reminded me a little bit of like COVID, where you had like the shortened schedule and you had teams, remember, like the Florida Marlins, the Miami Marlins, were nowhere and suddenly got to the second round. So you never know what that sprint season is going to do there too, which makes me excited. But yeah, no, good luck with the future. Good luck with the rest of the season. Thank you for the time. And one more time, my name is Scott Churchson with Stream Punk Soccer, Mr. Bill Akins, who covers the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. This is part of the entire Stream Punk Entertainment umbrella. So whether it's cinema, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's Canadian football, if it's more or less a second-tier sport, we're probably going to be covering it in some way or form. Thanks as always for tuning in. I appreciate the time. You guys are awesome. Take care and stay well.